For a little over 3 months, I have been using the AMD Radeon RX 9070 XT in my main PC, and I gotta say, compared to previous experiences on Radeon graphics cards, at least for over a decade now, this has by far been the best experience. And in my opinion, it is in a different tier of drivers and usage that I'm used to experiencing from AMD. And the reason, I guess, that you probably, maybe a lot of people out there will like, I've tried the RX 7000 series, I've tried 6000 series, and it's been fine for me. And the reason being that my opinion probably differ a lot here is because I've edited a lot of videos and do a lot of things outside of just gaming. And I've always said in my reviews, if you're just gaming, AMD cards have always been great value, and they've always hit hard in terms of their price point and the specs, especially the hardware you get for the money. But this time around with the RX 9070 XT and also the 9070, I feel like these are really good cards and you're really getting a lot of value for money, not just from the gaming side of things, but also from if you want to do content creation. Things are really polished up to the point where a lot of my complaints in the original reviews that I did and switches that I did in the past, AMD's pretty much fixed all those to the point where they're doing things that are not even just caught up to Nvidia now. They're doing things that are better than Nvidia, which is really impressive. And we'll start off this video, I've got like a whole 2-page document here of things that we're gonna go through with all these things that I've noticed. There's things that still I feel could use improvement as well, but I'm gonna go through all these lists and we'll start off with the capture card compatibility. Now, for a lot of videos, I do side-by-side comparisons for you guys. I'm using a capture card to get that footage because it doesn't affect the FPS, it doesn't affect the numbers, and it's just really smooth process for me to be able to get you guys side-by-side footage and then reference that with the graphs. And here's where, with the RX 9000 series in particular, the capture card compatibility is just really good. In fact, it's even better now than Nvidia's capture card compatibility, to the point where it looks at the capture card itself and then focuses on the max refresh rate that you can record at various resolutions. So a lot of the times I don't even have to manually change the settings on my capture card to get all 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. This just does it fluid, as opposed to Nvidia. It'll then come up with a message on my capture card saying resolution not supported, please resize it, and I have to then waste more time to do this when I'm benchmarking the Nvidia cards. So that's a really good setting and really good feature that I've noticed, that compared to previous times with AMD, I had a lot of problems with capture card compatibility. And it's funny because I've been using the exact same capture card over the last couple of years. And so pretty much the driver level here, things have gotten a lot better. So good job there, AMD. But also let's talk about the gaming experience too, because this is a big one for me personally, but we'll talk about that, of course, right after today's video sponsor. Do you need to get Windows 10 or Windows 11 activated and don't want to spend $200 or some other exorbitant price? Well, if so, today's video sponsor, VIP SCD Keys, has you covered. For as little as $15 using the coupon code BFTYC, you can get Windows 10 activated, and for a little bit more, you can get Windows 11 activated too. Links in the description below to find out more. Welcome back to Tech Yes City. Now, the RX 9000 series, the gaming experience here is really good. I feel like AMD have polished their drivers to the point where your 0.1% lows are really important for me personally. I notice if 0.1% lows are bad, I'm always going to get bad stuttering, as opposed to 1% lows. When I test these out, it really, for me, isn't indicative of games that can still have stuttering that can affect your gameplay, especially if they're competitive multiplayer titles. But for instance, this morning I was just testing out Fortnite before I made this video. I wanted to test out a whole match, like start to finish, close to 30 minutes roughly, and there was not one bad 0.1% stutter in that whole time I was testing out this game. And so this is on the 9070 GRE as well, which isn't the 9070 XT too. I got this on the test bench, but you can just see here, like when you customize the settings too, this is a 4K experience that I'm getting here, but I'm using the TSR high settings, I'm using balanced, I'm using lower settings on certain things, and then high textures, and really blending the settings to get a high FPS experience at 4K. And so this is, I guess, going to segue into another part here, but ultimately the drivers with AMD, they've gotten really good where you need them. And that's, of course, massive multiplayer titles where they're competitive too. And so AMD's really focused on this, and I've noticed this, and it's a really important thing for them to focus on, I'd say above all else, when it comes to their drivers. Make sure that the games that a lot of people are playing online, where they can't afford to have stuttering, they don't get stuttering. The other stuff, you can patch that out, you can get on top of that in a couple of months. I'm sure people aren't going to really care too much if their RPG in their storytelling is having a little bit of stuttering, but when it comes to clutch plays, no one wants stuttering in that. It's very frustrating. So AMD have really focused their drives, I've noticed when I've tested a lot of these competitive multiplayer titles, outside of our standard benchmark runs, I've just noticed it's been a really smooth experience. Whether for me personally, it's Fortnite, it's Warcraft 3, it's for instance, playing a bit of Counter-Strike 2. It's just been a really good experience on the RX 9000 series. So the next talking point we've got here is the Radeon Adrenalin software. Now, this is actually going to have two pieces to it because I feel like it's got really good positives, but it's also got a few complaints, pet peeves. They're not groundbreaking, they're not game-changing, but things that I think could use improvement with the Adrenalin software. And that is, for instance, first of all, let's go over the good. I haven't had one crash on the Adrenalin software with the RX 9000 series usage outside of me putting in unstable undervolts. But in terms of recording and utilizing the Relive software, the desktop capture software, it's really good now. I'm not having any problems using the footage that I'm recording on my desktop and then dropping that in Premiere Pro. Whereas previously on the RX 7000 series, I was having a lot of problems here to the point where it was breaking the audio in my videos, and it was just really frustrating. But AMD have gone back and fixed that. It's got no problems now. And also on top of that, the Adrenalin software, in my opinion, is, for me personally anyway, it's working a lot better than the Nvidia app. I noticed there's no stuttering in my desktop usage. There's no sort of like this blanket of input lag that I feel you're getting from the Nvidia app. And this is actually the biggest reason, this right here, this point, is for me personally the biggest reason why I changed over to the RX 9070 XT and gave AMD another chance so soon after my previous experience on the RX 7000 series. And that was because I just got really fed up real quick with the Nvidia app, and not just that, being forced to use it over the GeForce experience with the RTX 5000 series. I feel like Nvidia just came out and they had this really good software with the GeForce experience, but then people thought, oh, you got to log in. It must be so bad that you've got to log in. But for me personally, I had no added input lag on my system. I've just had a really good experience on the GeForce experience when I was using that. And then with the RTX 5000 series, they've just taken that away and they're forcing you to use the Nvidia app, which I feel like has this other ulterior motive where it's more about collecting telemetry and being more invasive than it is about actually giving the user the best experience, which is why I've messaged Nvidia a lot of times, and I've said this publicly in videos, I want the GeForce experience back, at least add in some beta support or something, so guys like me can give Nvidia a proper run, where Nvidia still does some things, as we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. They still do things a little bit better when it comes to especially the productivity side of things versus the RX 9000 series. Though at this point in time, the Adrenalin software for the RX 9000 series is just working so much better for me personally because it just doesn't have this blanket of input lag, and it's just working really well. Now, another tip that I do recommend people do is go into the Adrenalin software, turn off HDCP, as well as another thing I do is I turn off all the logging metrics. I actually disable all of those because that's less polling while you're playing games and things like this. So if you want really good 0.1% lows, this is going a little bit off topic during this video, but I always like to tell you guys, with Windows and also software like this, always keep things that you don't need to turn on off. And so my complaint here with the Adrenalin software, first of all, would just be to have these off by default. People can turn them on if they want them, but have these polling things just off by default. As well as, for me personally, I'd like to see HDCP off by default. But outside of that, another complaint with the Adrenalin software would be the locking down of the drivers to the point where you can't use programs like MSI Afterburner, which are really easy to use, especially if you're using it to track metrics while you're gaming. MSI Afterburner is really good in terms of locking in undervolts or overclocks and also changing things on the fly. But the Adrenalin software does this. However, this is where we're going to come to another complaint that's sort of integrated with the Adrenalin software, and that would be that the undervolts that I've been posting in some of my reviews of the RX 9000 series, even though they work at these settings, if I'm just gaming for hours on these settings, they'll be absolutely fine. But then when I'm just using general desktop usage and the GPU's kind of going up and down like a yo-yo, this is where those undervolts actually become a little bit unstable, to the point where I've had to lock in now on my RX 9070 XT, for instance, I've been using the Hellhound edition, by the way. I've had to lock in a minus 20% power limit, minus 20 undervolt on the millivolts, and then a 2650 with fast timings. I've found I've had zero problems in terms of stability on this particular setting. As opposed to gaming, I was able to do minus 60 millivolts, a little bit more aggressive on the memory, and also minus 30% power limit. And I could play games just indefinitely, but the moment I start doing loading up Premiere Pro, start editing videos, things will just crash out. So the undervolts seem like they work fine in games, but then the variability, when there's a variable load placed on the GPU, the undervolts aren't as stable as, say, in video. Those undervolts that I'm posting in the videos, they're working absolutely fine in productivity as well. So just as we're talking about video editing, this is where the next point and the biggest contention, the biggest thing that I'd like to see AMD improve with their drivers going forward would be the utilization of the GPU in applications like Premiere Pro, for instance. So at this point in time, if I'm rendering out a video, the final render is actually utilizing the GPU a lot. But then if I'm doing things like scrubbing, this is the biggest difference at this point in time between an AMD GPU and an Nvidia GPU, at least in Premiere Pro. So if you've got an RTX 5070 Ti, for instance, it's a lot of times going to be using 100% of the GPU when you're doing intense scrubbing. That's if you've got 2 or 3 video things in your live edit and you're scrubbing through, that'll be a little bit more smoother on the Nvidia side as opposed to the AMD side, because if we're looking at a GPU like the RX 9070 XT, it's not being utilized as much as the Nvidia GPU. So I would like to see a driver update here where perhaps AMD can get more utilization out of their GPU, and this would be fantastic. I think this is, for me, the biggest complaint of today's video would just be this right here. And also a little minor complaint with the Adrenalin software would just be the recording indicator. I'd like to see that be able to be moved to the 3 other corners of your desktop rather than just having it at the top left. I'd like to see the option to put it on the top right or the bottom left. Now, the final note on the Adrenalin software is actually the ability to select which monitor you want to record on, and this is really good. I found with Shadow Play in the past or the Nvidia app, it's actually been problematic in that you couldn't select your monitor that you wanted to record on. It would just be your primary monitor. And so this is actually really good that you can manually select your monitor to record the desktop footage. And I actually haven't had it bug out yet, because on the Nvidia side of things, I did have this occasionally bug out where it would record the wrong monitor. So it looks like in this case, the Relive software is working a little bit better than the Nvidia app. But also on that note, I would like to see just having a single hotkey, because the only pet peeve I have at the moment is you have to use a modifier and a hotkey to start your capture or close off your capture. Like for instance, I've got Control F8, as opposed to me previously on Nvidia, I'd be just using F8. So I'd like to see AMD change that just to have a single hotkey. If they can't do it and there's an explanation for it, I'd love to hear that as well. And also I've noticed monitor rescaling options, as well as things like super resolution, work a lot better than they used to. And also monitor initial connections or alt tabbing handshake times have been reduced drastically. Then for this last part, we're going to talk about some of the bugs I've noticed with the RX 9000 series, even on the latest driver. Hopefully AMD can fix this, but also if you guys have problems with the latest drivers and you're on an RX 9000 series card in particular, drop some comments down below. I'm sure AMD will read this. If not, I'll just send it off to their rep as soon as they can and say, hey, look, pass this on to AMD and fix it, the driver team. So hopefully they can get that done. But here's where we got the first complaint, and that is there was a free-to-play game on Epic Game Store that was a Deathloop, and this game just does not boot on any RX 9000 series card I've tried. This is on Windows 11 IoT, and here's where obviously I just want to play the game and try it out, and it just fails to boot completely on the RX 9000 series cards. The last topic in today's video is the big one for some people. For me personally, it's not such a big thing. And that would be FSR 4 versus DLSS 4. And here's where I noticed lately, a lot of games that are coming out have already inbuilt TSR. That's the temporal upscaling. And the biggest example I'm going to use here is Fortnite, because it's a game that I play a lot with my son. And the TSR in this game just looks better than both DLSS and FSR, even the latest implementations that they've put in the game. And so I think with AMD, they haven't even bothered putting FSR in Fortnite, because they've probably looked at it and gone, wow, like there's no way we can compete with this. It looks incredible. That's at least my opinion. But With FSR 4, I've found in games like Warhammer Space Marine 2, for instance, it looks incredible. But then, of course, DLSS 4 does have more compatibility. It's more widespread. And even then, you've got that Nvidia app override, which I've found actually works really well. As opposed to overriding FSR 4 at this point in time, I've just noticed there's a lot of bugs when you are using the FSR 4 override. For instance, things like ghosting or a lot more artifacting. So Nvidia does have that advantage with DLSS 4. There's no denying that. But for me personally, it's not affecting my experience at all in terms of how I use this GPU. Because again, I'm finding a lot of the games that I play, either, for instance, Warcraft 3 remastered, that just doesn't have any upscaling in it. And I'd like to see it because I play at 4K. I'd actually really like to see just me, like I could turn everything to max and then use upscaling, actually get a high frame rate. But for other games like Fortnite, there's TSR already built in. So I've just found, like, between the games that I play, I'm not really utilizing DLSS 4, nor am I utilizing FSR 4. So it's not a big selling point for me, though. Keep in mind, this is where the last part of the video, it all comes down to what are you doing? And so if you're playing a couple of games, 3 or 4 games, look at those games and see, am I going to get a lot more out of AMD for price performance and raw rasterization, which I currently feel like AMD is doing a better job there than Nvidia, versus say Nvidia, am I going to be using DLSS 4 a lot? Because that will be an advantage that Nvidia has. Now, in terms of frame generation, the last thing to talk about here is frame generation. I just haven't found myself using frame generation at all because I would always like to sacrifice the actual slight sacrifice in visual fidelity by lowering settings to get a higher frame rate that way, as opposed to just maxing everything out and turning on frame gen. Because I found frame gen, there's always, like, sooner or later, if you're playing a game, you're just going to notice some sort of artifacting, whether it's on your crosshairs or whether it's just some sort of ghosting. I've actually just noticed that frame generation really on Nvidia or AMD, it just has it has a few problems. And I feel like every time I've used it, there's always just been these annoying artifacts that I just really can't get around. So that's my opinion there with FSR 4 versus DLSS 4. If it's a big selling point for you, then definitely, and you take advantage of it a lot, then DLSS 4 is going to be still at this point in time better than FSR 4. But if you're like me and these things don't really apply a whole lot, and you're just looking at the raw price performance advantage of the RX 9000 series cards, then by all means, go get one of these cards. They're actually going to be really good. And so for me personally, this is the first time where I've used AMD in over a decade, and I'm comfortable staying on their GPU. So really good job to AMD. They've really made improvements with the RX 9000 series, not just on the driver front, but also with the actual GPUs themselves. And I guess this is where we'll focus on the actual power efficiency. And so I like what they've done. Instead of chasing the crazy high end of the market with the RTX 5090 or 5080, they just said, look, we're going to target the section where a lot more people are going to benefit from getting the cards right. And so with the RX 9070 XT and also the 9070, they're definitely two of the best cards from this generation. And from Nvidia's side, I'd say the RTX 5070 Ti would be one of their better cards too. But with Nvidia, as we said before, for me personally, I just really hate the Nvidia app, but I really love utilizing native GPU desktop recording software. It just saves a lot of time when it works properly, but I feel like for me, that's the biggest letdown right now. But also, for some reason, Nvidia decided to take away PhysX support with their RTX 5000 series cards, which is a weird move because Nvidia were the people who acquired the company, I believe, in like 2008, who made PhysX, and then they're just taking it away now. It's such a weird thing. Anyhow, guys, I've rambled on enough here today about changing over to AMD, and it's just been a really good experience. So overall, really happy with what AMD have done. Yeah, it's just surprising that I would go from RTX 5000 to RX 9000, and for me personally, get a better experience. That's the weirdest thing, though. Keep in mind, that said, I would say that the RTX 4080 Super or RTX 4090 would probably be best in slot for me still, because then I could use GFE. But really, I like this time around supporting AMD because I feel like they're doing a great job this time around. And so I do want to throw my support outside of being, an objective tech guy. I do want to throw some of my personal support towards AMD, where I've been recommending people get the RX 9000 series, a lot of my personal friends. Anyhow, guys, that's just my opinions on the whole matter here today. Hope you enjoyed this one, and also do let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. Love reading them as always. And with that aside, I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.